Everyone thinks governments can just print more money whenever they want to fix problems. But the truth is, it's not that simple. And if they do it the wrong way, it can cause serious trouble. Let me tell you a story about a curious boy named Elon, who learned why money only works when it is limited, trusted, and earned. Imagine a boy named Elon Musk. Not the famous billionaire we know today, but a curious teenager living long ago in a quiet village called Supai, hidden deep in the red canyons of Arizona. While other kids played in rivers or rode horses, Elon spent his time collecting old coins, building little machines, and asking questions nobody else thought about, like where money really comes from, why it means so much, and how a simple piece of paper can control how people live. He didn't care about being rich, he just wanted to understand money, why some people have plenty while others struggle to get by. When he turned 18, he left Supai to find answers. He traveled through dusty towns, rode slow trains, read books in old libraries, and talked to bankers, shopkeepers, and strangers under the stars, learning everything he could about money and how it moves through the world. One quiet night, as he sat alone by a campfire, a soft glowing light appeared in the sky. From it came a strange figure, not quite human, not quite a machine, who spoke in a calm, deep voice. "You may ask for one wish." Elon wasn't sure if it was an angel, a dream, or something holy, but without hesitation he said, "I want a machine that can print unlimited money." Suddenly, a humming metal machine appeared beside him, glowing faintly. The figure vanished into the night, leaving Elon with his wish. He returned to Supai with the magical machine and used it to build a large, beautiful home filled with everything he wanted. But soon, life felt too easy, too quiet, and Elon grew bored. One morning, he decided to share his gift. He printed piles of money and gave it to everyone in the village. People cheered and laughed. For the first time, no one was poor. But the very next day, Elon noticed something strange. He walked into his favorite donut shop, ready to buy his usual treat, but the price shocked him. The donut that cost 50 cents yesterday now cost $5. When Elon asked the baker why, the baker shrugged and said, "Everyone has money now, so I have to charge more to keep up." Elon walked through the village, confused. Prices were rising fast everywhere. The farmer doubled the price of vegetables because he had to pay more for seeds and tools. The tailor refused to make clothes unless people paid him in gold instead of paper money. People stopped working because they already had so much money they didn't need any more. They thought, why work hard when money is easy to get? Within just a few days, the village became quiet and empty. Shops closed because no one was buying. Fields were left unplanted because no one wanted to farm. Elon realized that by giving everyone unlimited money, he had broken the entire system. The money lost its value because there was too much of it, and it no longer made people want to work or trade. Standing on the hill where he once dreamed of helping his village, Elon understood something important. Money only works when it is trusted, earned, and limited. Printing more money doesn't create real wealth, it only causes problems. Now that you've seen what happens when too much money is printed, let's take a step back and try to understand something even more important. What exactly is money, and how does it really work? Money is something that everyone uses every single day, whether you are buying food at a market, paying for clothes, or even just getting a cup of coffee. But money isn't just the paper bills or shiny coins you carry in your pocket. It is actually a tool that helps people trade and exchange goods and services much more easily than they could before. A very long time ago, people did not have money at all. Instead, they used a system called barter, where they would trade one item directly for another. For example, if someone had extra eggs but needed a pair of shoes, they would have to find a shoemaker who wanted eggs. This was a difficult and slow way to trade because both people needed to want exactly what the other person had at the same time. Money was invented to make trading much easier and faster. Instead of swapping things directly, people agreed to use something that everyone trusted, such as gold, silver, or special coins, which could be exchanged for almost anything. This something became money. Money works because people trust that it has value, And because it is limited in supply, meaning there isn't an endless amount of it floating around, if everyone had as much money as Elon had with his magical machine, then money would lose its value, and it would no longer work as a tool for trade. Money also works because everyone agrees to accept it as a way to pay for goods and services. This is called a medium of exchange. It is like a promise that when you give someone money, you can later use that money to buy something you need or want. Besides being a medium of exchange, money also serves two other important roles. One is being a store of value, which means that you can save money now and use it in the future without it losing its worth immediately. The other is being a unit of account, which helps people measure and compare the value of different goods and services easily. Did you know that paper money was first invented in China? More than 1,000 years ago, during the time of the Tang Dynasty, merchants started using paper notes as a way to avoid carrying heavy coins around on long journeys. Then, about 200 years later, during the Song Dynasty, the Chinese government officially began printing paper money, making it the world's first official currency printed on paper, a huge step forward in the history of money. This idea of using paper money slowly spread to other parts of the world over many centuries. The value of money depends on three very important things. 1. Trust. People need to believe that money is really worth something valuable. 2. Scarcity. Money must be limited in how much of it exists. 3. Acceptance. Everyone must agree to use money as a way to trade and pay for things. When these three things work together well, money can do its job perfectly and help economies grow strong. Having understood how money really works and what happens when there's too much of it, a big question arises. If governments have the power to print money, why do they choose to borrow it instead? At first, it might seem silly. Why would anyone borrow money if they could just make more of it themselves? To understand this, imagine a small bakery run by a man named Trump. Trump makes fresh bread every morning and sells it in his village. He uses the money he earns to buy flour, sugar, and pay his workers. But one day Trump runs out of money and still needs to buy ingredients. So, instead of borrowing from someone, he starts printing fake money in his basement. At first, things seem fine. He buys what he needs, makes more bread, and keeps the bakery open. But soon, people in the village realize that there's a lot more money floating around. Prices start going up. The same loaf of bread that cost $2 now costs $10. Why? Because when more money is everywhere, but the amount of bread is still the same, each dollar becomes less special. It loses value. That's exactly what happens when a government prints too much money. It creates inflation. Prices go up, and the money people have saved becomes weaker. Now let's look at a smarter way, borrowing. Imagine instead that Trump doesn't print fake money. He goes to a trusted neighborhood and asks for a loan. He says, "Lend me $100 and I'll pay you back in a few weeks, plus a little extra." The neighbor agrees, and Trump uses that real money to keep his bakery running. Because the money Trump used was already in the system, not freshly created, prices stay stable. No inflation, no chaos. Governments do the same thing. When they need more money than they earn from taxes, maybe to build roads, fund hospitals, or help during emergencies, they borrow money from people, banks, or even other countries by selling bonds. These bonds are like IOUs that say, "We'll pay you back later," with interest. Borrowing shows that the government is being careful. It tells people, we won't just print new money and cause inflation, we'll use what's already there and pay it back over time. Let's return to our baker friend, Trump. Remember how he borrowed $100 from his neighbor? He made the bread, sold it, and paid his neighbor back with a little extra. But what if Trump kept borrowing more and more money every week? Not just from one neighbor, but from 10, 20, even the whole village. At first, people might trust him. After all, he's been baking for years. But as the debts pile up, neighbors begin to worry. What if Trump can't pay them back? What if he's using the money not to grow his bakery, but to throw big parties or buy shiny new ovens he doesn't need? Soon, people become nervous. They stop lending him money unless he promises to pay much higher interest. Some refuse to lend at all. Now Trump is stuck. No more easy money and a huge pile of debt. Governments face the same problem. When they borrow too much and don't manage it wisely, they risk losing the trust of investors and citizens. Many countries have faced serious consequences when they borrowed more money than they could handle. Let's explore a few of them. Argentina. In the 1990s, President Carlos Menem linked Argentina's peso to the US dollar to stop hyperinflation. At first it helped, but later it caused problems. When Fernando de la Rua became president in 1999, he faced a weak economy and rising debt. Instead of fixing the system, his government kept borrowing to fill budget gaps. The dollar link made it hard to export and stopped the government from using tools to fix the economy. To keep getting loans, Argentina followed strict IMF rules that led to spending cuts and tax hikes, which made people even angrier. When banks froze people's savings, a move called the Corralito, protests exploded. In December 2001, riots filled the streets, and De la Rua fled by helicopter. Argentina then defaulted on over $80 billion of debt, the biggest ever at that time. The result? People lost their savings, inflation soared, poverty spread, and Argentina has faced more defaults since, in 2014 and 2020. Japan. Japan has been borrowing money for many years. By 2023, its debt was more than 250% of the country's total income, or GDP, the highest among developed countries. This started in the 1990s, after a big financial crash known as the asset bubble burst. The government tried to fix the economy by spending more and cutting taxes, which meant borrowing more money. Over the years, Japan kept borrowing to support its aging population, pay for healthcare, and help businesses. But most of the money Japan owes is to its own people and banks, not to foreign countries. Also, interest rates in Japan have stayed very low, so paying back the debt has not been too hard. Still, there are risks. If interest rates go up or the economy slows down, it could become much harder for Japan to manage its debt. So even though Japan hasn't defaulted, many experts are watching closely to see what happens next. After exploring the problems caused by excessive borrowing, it's time to examine what happens when countries print too much money. Zimbabwe. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe's president, Robert Mugabe, made a big decision. He took land from white farmers and gave it to black Zimbabweans as part of a land reform program. While it was meant to fix old injustices, many of the new farmers didn't have the tools or training to run the farms, and food production dropped fast. Because farming was a big part of Zimbabwe's economy, this caused major problems. The country was making less money. There were food shortages, and businesses started to struggle. Instead of fixing the root problems, the government began printing more and more money to pay for things like salaries, war costs, and programs to keep people happy. At first, it seemed like things might be okay. But soon, prices started rising faster and faster, and by 2008, inflation got completely out of control. Every day, prices doubled. A loaf of bread could cost millions of Zimbabwean dollars. People had to carry bags of cash just to buy simple things, and their savings became completely worthless. The government tried to print bigger and bigger bills, up to $100 trillion, but it didn't help. In the end, Zimbabwe had to give up its own money. It started using US dollars and other foreign currencies just to survive. The result was a total economic collapse. People lost their jobs, hospitals and schools broke down, and millions left the country to find a better life elsewhere. It took years for Zimbabwe to begin recovering, and even today, trust in the country's money system is still low. Venezuela. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, with an estimated 304 billion barrels of oil. For years, this made the country rich, and the government used the oil money to pay for housing, food programs, and public services. Life wasn't perfect, but many people lived comfortably, all powered by oil. But around 2014, everything started to change. Oil prices crashed, and since oil was the main way Venezuela made money, the government suddenly couldn't afford to pay for all the things it used to. Instead of cutting spending or finding new ways to earn money, the government chose to print more and more money to cover the costs. At first, people hoped it would help, but printing money without real value behind it only made things worse. Prices started rising faster and faster. By 2018, inflation had reached more than 1,000,000%, which meant the money in people's pockets became almost worthless overnight. Imagine working all month, only to find that your salary can't even buy a loaf of bread. Supermarkets were nearly empty, and even basic things like milk, rice, or toilet paper became hard to find. Medicine ran out, hospitals broke down, and many families went days without food or power. The situation became so bad that millions of people fled the country, walking across borders into Colombia and other nearby nations just to find food, jobs, and safety. With a clear understanding of the real problem, that printing too much money leads to inflation and borrowing too much creates risky debt, the next question is, what can governments actually do to fix this mess? First, they need to start spending money on things that truly help people in the long run, like better schools, hospitals, roads, support for farmers, and help for small businesses, not on flashy vanity projects or luxuries for politicians. Second, they must make sure everyone, especially the rich and large corporations, pays their fair share of taxes. A country can't run properly if only the poor and middle class carry the weight, while the wealthy exploit loopholes to avoid contributing. Third, corruption has to end. That means being honest and transparent with public money, punishing those who steal, and letting citizens clearly see where every dollar goes. Because corruption is like a leak in a bucket. No matter how much money you pour in, it keeps dripping out. Fourth, governments and central banks must manage money supply carefully. Not too little to choke growth, not too much to trigger inflation. Just like cooking, you need the right heat to get the best result. When you put all this together, the lesson is clear. Printing money doesn't make a country richer. And borrowing too much doesn't solve problems, it just delays them and makes them worse. But here's the truth they never taught you in school. They didn't show you how money really works. They didn't explain how inflation quietly steals your future, or how governments and banks play a game behind the scenes, a game you were never meant to understand. So if this video opened your eyes and made you think, don't stop here, because while most people are suffering in silence during economic crises, a small group of people, the wealthy, keep getting richer. Why? Because they understand how the system works. And now, you can too. Click the link in the description to learn why the rich get richer during recessions.